think you all know this, but I really enjoy comfortable silence. Not having the need to say something just because you have to say it. Even when you're sitting in front of a group. Just simply taking one's time and enjoying the fact that maybe there's just nothing to say yet. But being okay with that simple fact. For me to cultivate the ability is to enable myself to go deeper into the relationship with myself. Any discomfort that I feel is just simply that, discomfort which I feel. Even if there is an external challenge of some kind, it doesn't even matter what that challenge is. Often the question is, do I need to feel the way that I feel in order to engage with that challenge? And often the answer is no. Because in reality, me as the individual or you as the individual, we are feeling the bulk of that intensity, not that person or that thing. So to cultivate an attitude which enables me to become softer on the inside and recognize some of the challenge and what it triggers inside of me is, to me, very constructive. So in truth, I was not always so okay with being in a group or even being beside somebody and sitting in quiet. It felt funny. So it's always a blessing when I have an opportunity to sit within that comfort, because it's an affirmation of how self-development works. Simply applying awareness into oneself is the first step. Second step is developing an action. So what is that action that is asked of you, that is requested by you from the experience that you're having? To cultivate the ability to respond to that intelligence which is giving you the answer which you just had a question to. And for me, that's really phenomenal. But it's testing that answer with an action and then seeing what a result is without bias, without superimposing an already predetermined decision as to what is going to occur, but from a very pure and simple place, apply action based upon the answer which you received. And then notice what happens. Become very familiar with the subtlety of sensation which is manifesting from the inside out, more so than from the outside in. Because this inside out place is your response to the environment. The more ability we get to pick up onto the subtlety, then the greater chance we have to maintain equanimity. Because at that subtle level, it's not yet a giant wave. It's just a small ripple, and that is something that is very manageable. We catch that just small ripple before it manifests fully. Attaching that to the rhythms of our breathing. When we inhale, we feel something very specific, and when we exhale, we also feel something very specific, tied into our ability to soften and relax. The body is incredible. It's actually very simply made in terms of mechanics. There's only so many parts. And there's only so many things that these parts do. So we narrow down the scope of what we need to understand significantly. Probably the most advanced part of this human makeup is the mind, in terms of its ability to create, manifest, and work with its dexterity and talents. So that piece to understand, we can leave for a little while in terms of needing to get to know all of it and understand how it all works, and rather rely on the sensations of body and the sensations of breath to inform us how to relate to this incredible genius that we call mind. Pulling down on the strings of the mind and incorporating them into the relaxation of the body, into the strength of the body, the anchoring of the body. So that then a body-mind connection is fully formed. And that body-mind connection is looped and secured through the rhythms of the breathing. The test and measure which we're developing as a response to this instruction of intelligence has a training ground, and that training ground is your meditation. So in the safe environment of your meditation cushion or your seat or that wonderful corner of your room or house, we develop and forge sometimes relationship with the mind. Taking on the position of enabling ourselves to be soft, to be receptive, to be the student. And with this studentship, there is definitely a responsibility to keep up. And that's okay. For as long as we're alive, there's actually something that we're working on. That's an inevitability. And within that, a built-in beauty. This is where a lot of poetry comes from, is that relationship that we have to this intelligence. The challenges that come up within the human experience as to how to best relate, best communicate, best receive, and best execute the instruction which is coming from this intelligence. I feel very strongly that any movement forward with action based in a response to this intelligence is perfect. There's really no wrong step. Every step is a perfect step. Because you are earnest within your search and within your development. And you can correct me to yourself if I'm wrong in that. But it feels as though it's very true. You have a high level of earnestness towards achieving that which you see within your mind's eye as being important, as being real. Oftentimes more real as we perceive it than anything else that's happening in our life. And often we separate the two, that which is my development or what I see spiritually or what I see as a height of mental development, and then the other parts of my human experience. What we're developing with our meditation practice is the ability to see all of the parts of this human experience as being a part of the development towards that one that you see and wish to achieve. So it's within these small steps and within all of the relationships that we hold that enables us to turn the key. Because often we're able to put the key into the lock very clean and clearly, but it's the turning of the key that sometimes is the challenge. It's that step just before the breakthrough. And that's that action that I was talking about earlier. How do I or anybody organize themselves in such a way to maintain accordance to that intelligence? And the answer could be many. but one answer is consistency. And I'm not sure if you recognize this within yourself, but oftentimes there's a decision which is made today, which should be carried forth into tomorrow and the next day, but when tomorrow comes, it almost slips out of the mind. And then we continue on, almost not thinking about it until something happens to trigger our memory back to, oh yeah, I decided that I was going to shift the way that I look at myself, or the way that I speak to others, or the way that I walk even down the street. So it's developing the sweet qualities of discipline to maintain continuity from one day to the next. And ideally, this does not feel like a challenge. Ideally, it feels like a joy. It feels like an ease. But it also has to be practical. And often, we're all very busy and multifaceted. So for us to, in a sense, painstakingly take our time to observe thought and observe response and reaction is not that practical. But what does become incredibly practical is when you reserve time for yourself. In the morning and in the evening if you can, if not both in one, where you take yourself into the space of connection to that intelligence, of developing a clear action from the inside. And then within that relationship, continuity. To such an extent that when you come out of your meditation practice, you are actually that state that is perfectly placed for the action to occur in accordance to the intelligence. The instruction is now being carried through naturally. Why? Simply because you made the intention that you wished for it to happen, and then you put effort towards that in the form of a technical practice. So you close off all other influence and just simply ground into that one piece of information. And allow it to soften. And as it softens, that sensation distributes itself into the cellular level of the body, into the muscle memory of the body, communicating through the nervous system, creating neural pathways that are strengthening each time you sit. For many purposes, but one, the simple purpose that when you come out of it, that which you wish to achieve becomes second nature. So we can see what starts to happen after 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. It becomes so well worn and understood that you live that. And then over a period of time, we can't necessarily say when, because it's individual, you become that which you see within your mind's eye as being the pinnacle experience. But what's extraordinary is that every small step along the way becomes glorious. Because now you're in accordance to the instruction that you actually asked for. So now it's no longer asking the question and wondering when and how you're going to receive the answer, but rather realizing this is how I'm receiving the answer, and I'm learning how to embody the information and live through it. So it's no longer second-hand, it's actually first-hand, embodied, lived experience. And we can take that viewpoint of what someone sees as being the highest, but then we take that exact same equation and then apply it to everything and anything. I focus on the highest point, that spiritual development, first, always, because that spiritual height will then filter through everything else that you experience. If we focus too much on the physical moment without expressing and extending ourselves outwards, it feels like we're held or trapped within just the physical experience of the reality. But if we reach towards the spiritual height and pull it into that smaller, more physical experience, we get to see how wide and broad and soft and light every moment really is, because it is all connected as one. But this concept of oneness is a theory, a very good one, and there's truth and reality to it, but we want to experience it for ourselves. We don't ideally want to take the information and say, yes, that's a good idea, and turn it into a belief system. Rather, we want to harness the belief system which we already have, and then begin to stretch that belief system, expanding the belief system in order to encompass the realization, the embodiment that everything is connected as one. And again, that's a very high state of understanding, which is very possible. But the pursuit of that then filters through everything else that we do. So now your life is just one beautiful spiritual experience, if you so choose. Your life can be any experience that you wish to have. What you wish to occur must and is always related to your ability to believe in yourself. If you believe it's possible, it becomes possible. If you doubt its truth, then it becomes more challenging. It's not impossible, it just becomes that much more challenging. So the hub of the focus, revolving around the technique of meditation and the ability to move deeper and higher into meditation, is proof. One must be proven to oneself that it is true and real. And therefore, at a very deep and subtle level, the belief system will start to shift. I'm framing it this way and talking about it tonight because it is something that is a constant for the human beings to work with. Our belief system, how we feel about ourselves. And what's amazingly wonderful about meditation is that the sensation which it invokes supports positive language towards the individual who is sitting. Positive language towards the individual who is sitting. It invokes clarity of mind. It slows down the amount of thoughts that come through the mind at a single moment in time. So the challenge which one then is working with becomes less burdensome because of the act of meditation, the action which is being put forth, the releasing of chemicals and hormones within the body, the organization of the neurons within the brain. Again, there's only so many things that the body does, and so many ways that it can do it. So we want to leverage that ability and know that you sitting here now, just with a simple movement of the body, you can actually shift how you feel. And with this micro movement, you just simply search consciously for the central axis. That central axis could be a comfortable position with one knee up and feeling very relaxed. It doesn't need to be formal. But it's a central axis that gives you the ability to feel centered, grounded. And then we focus as well and as long as we possibly can on the rhythms of your breathing. Because the rhythm of the breath is populating the body's sensation with goodness, which is then going to counteract any negative bias which may be in your mind. We have to always return back to the negative bias as not being something that is your fault. You did not create it. It's actually a part of the human being. It's very, very old. It's part of that middle lower part of the brain. It's been around for so long with a very specific function. The function of, let's make sure that we're not going to get eaten today by something that's dangerous. But the danger has waned substantially. Shift in nature. We don't necessarily get chased around by saber-toothed tigers and big things like that. It's different kinds of danger, but the evolution has yet to catch up to that external reality. So these old parts of the programming within the brain still exist. So at this moment in time, this juncture, human beings are really starting to look at that as being potentially no longer needed. And it's coming up in so many ways. The mental health movement is really starting to grow with mental hygiene practices, mindfulness and meditation and yoga. So these are all examples as to how the human being is really starting to recognize that we actually don't need this part so active anymore inside. And as that is starting to grow in the individual's consciousness, it becomes more of a reality to move through it. But as it grows as part of the collective mind, then it really starts to move. All we need is a particular tipping point, and once it hits, then the whole thing will click, and it will be just a distant memory. So you truly are on the forefront of that evolution. You individually, but also us collectively. So we have to keep that in close mind, that the experiences that are occurring, which are positive and negative, the duality within the human nature is exactly that, a part of this human nature that we're working with. The more conscious we become of that, the more scientific we become with our meditation and with our life, the more proactive. The choice can be, am I going to lean towards that positive sensation with which my breathing is developing, or am I going to lean towards the negative bias or the challenge that is looping? And within that simple choice, we start to lighten the one side. That loop which is no longer needed just simply becomes lighter. The loop which is needed becomes stronger. If you say, how long will that take? It could take a day to finish it. It could take 2 days. It could take a week. It could take a month. But what it's looking for is that consistency and a very specific how. And you are actually the only person that truly knows how to do it for yourself based upon the instruction that you're getting. On my end, I will give you the technique. You will find other support to help you with that. But it's based on the individual and the consistency. Because you have to remember that we are creatures of habit and we are made of memory, muscle memory, patterns. So if something has worked really well one direction, it wants to stay. It takes a little convincing to jump over to the other side and then just create the well-worn path onto this other direction. So 1 or 2 months is not a stretch or an unrealistic goal to get over depression, for instance. And is very possible. Anxiety, all of these challenges that come up within life. Not only those mental challenges, but also life challenges. We're heading into the summer months, so this is a glorious time. Life becomes easier just by default because the warmth of the sun hits the skin, hits the eyes, starts to increase specific chemicals within the body that enables us to feel buoyant and light. So we want to capitalize on that experience. Become very conscious that nature has just given you a boon. Sitting down by the river. Once again, nature has just given you a boon. What happens when you sit by the flow of a river? What happens to your mind? What happens to your body? What happens to your eyes when you lie in the grass? When you look at the clouds? So we have to really rejoice in the fact that everything is on our side. Even that which is seemingly is not. Because that which is not is just applying a little bit of pressure in order to push you in the right direction. Now that's my choice and decision that I see it that way. It doesn't matter if that which is applying the pressure has a different attitude towards it. Do you understand what I mean? Because it is me who is the experiencer at this moment in time. That which is applying pressure is having its own experience, and then we share space in the middle. So this shared space is now another decision. Do I apply positivity? Do I apply negativity? Or do I just succumb to whatever is coming towards me? So becoming very clear and bright with that which makes you move, that which makes you grounded, that which makes you calm. And through that, generate incredible amounts of excitement. Why not? Or if that's not really your thing, then don't. There's no rules. Nobody said that there is any rules, per se, other than that which is the law of nature. A law that everything on the planet has to abide by. What is that exactly? Well, that's for an individual to inquire into. What happens within a day is varied based upon the individual's experience. There's no two individuals that will see or experience something exactly the same. So that subjective quality is actually really important. Oftentimes within a science setting, someone who is running an experiment would not necessarily want that subjective piece involved so heavily, but in this particular soft science of meditation, we actually rely on that ability to strengthen your own understanding, your own viewpoint, your own experience. And then through that, cultivate something that is called intuition. An intuitive sense of what is becomes very practical, because the intuition is beyond even that intelligence loop where you ask a question and then you receive an answer. The intuition is much quicker, lighter. It's that aha feeling that in an absolute way, yes, I know it's right. And in the intuition realm, we usually follow it right away. If someone gets an intuition, it's an absolute. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it becomes advantageous to begin to rely and trust on the experiences that we're having in relation to anything that we're soundboarding off of, to the point where the intuition is now fully developed and able to communicate. Feeding the intelligence, which is then feeding the experiences of the mind, which is then grounding itself into the tissue level of the body as a secured, understood experience, and then memory. A memory that we can return back to again and again through decision. Show me peace and tranquility. Just show it to me. What does it feel like? And notice on a very subtle level the shift in your body posture, in your soft palate, in your nasal passage. Did you start to breathe just slightly differently in order to support the request that you just made? To show me peace and tranquility. If the answer is yes in any of those, well, that's now a little breadcrumb for you to follow, to start doing a little bit of research as to how these conscious decisions are made. This organization of the body, a returning back to a memory, which is then given life through the rhythms of the breath that created a state for the mind to experience. And that state of mind then further supports the memory of the body. So then we have a loop. if we become very aware of our sensation, we then enable ourselves to create consistency. That consistency is the secret that we were talking about before to achieving the height. Because it's that new path that we want to form. Again and again and again, we can return back to that memory. This is why in so many of the ancient practices, they recommend not having stimulants within the body, substances that will alter the sensations you're having, especially when you're just starting out in a new project or in a new technique, because that consistency is actually what's going to make it all stick. If you have a sensation and then you move past it or beyond it and have a challenge getting back, then this is time wasted. This is challenge for no specific reason other than, I'm not sure what. It would be based on the individual. So the phenomenon of the human experience is one that is a mystery. Probably we know the least of the mind. The mechanics of the body is pretty well worn, pretty well understood, but the mind is this final frontier. So to not know everything about your mind or how it even works is actually natural. It's okay. It's actually, once again, the stage of our development, our personal and collective evolution. But what you do know and what you do understand is here. It is always with you. The known is with you as well as the unknown. And the ability to soften is the ability to rest into the two. That which is known, that's your security, that's your developed, that's your understood, and then we stand and sit into that as our platform for looking into this unknown. And the sensations that exist towards the unknown is something very different, isn't it? Those little twinges of fear or discomfort. The same kind of twinges that come up with silence when you're sitting with another or a group where there's nothing left to say and everyone just kind of sits there for a moment. So the loops of development are very closely related. Your external reality, your internal reality. Unknown is unknown. If you don't know what to say, it's the same as looking into the vista of eternity through your mind and saying, I have no idea what this means. So what's common is common. Unknown is unknown. Become comfortable with all aspects of your experience and who you are. Really examining whether or not you should be afraid at that moment in time, or whether or not you really should be worried at that time or anxious at that time. Whether it's valid. Is it present? Is it true at this moment, or is it based upon a past? Is it based upon an influence that is actually no longer needed? Now this is precious technique that we can apply to our meditation in the formal seat, but also technique that then we can apply to our day-to-day action, which we are understanding more and more as the practice of meditation. Meaning you sit, this is technique. The technique of meditation is developed so that then you can open your eyes and then work with it. The practice of meditation with all of your engagements of the day enables you to strengthen the ability to retain the quality which you manifested through your meditation practice, keeping you buoyant through the day so that then you can land at your second meditation in the evening. So you're catching yourself just before you go to bed and then take yourself deeper. If there's any discrepancies within that, then you find out within your evening meditation if you didn't know already, just from the interaction. But then you can solve that passively, not through writing it down and thinking it through, but just through simply engaging back in with the simple technique, which is releasing hormones and organizing your brain and your nervous system. Essentially healing that which needs to be healed and strengthening that which needs to be strengthened, so that then you're fortified for the next day's worth of action. And each time we go into this cycle, which is inevitable because we are part of nature, which is established in day, night, day, night, day, night. Each time we go through this cycle, consciously, it will get better. It will become easier. It will become clearer. That quickens when you make decisions that are based upon your best interest in the most positive of ways. It's phenomenal. You are incredibly porous, and you, meaning we, are so open to receive information. We're designed like that. We absorb, we're porous. We can take it all in, process it, and then apply it again. That is pretty phenomenal. So now you take that simple statement and then apply it to whatever you feel is important. Whatever you feel is important. And then see what happens. But remembering it's the consistency that we're looking for. Can you replay it as you did today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day? But not as an obsession, not as a tightening, but as a softening, as a letting nature take its course. But you are right there. You are right there making conscious decisions and then applying yourself. Fascinating. Any questions? How are you doing, good sir?
Pretty good, thanks. It's so funny, I was actually thinking about consistency before you spoke about it. And I think for me, I'm trying to understand myself in terms of why like energy level and engagement doesn't have that consistency for me. I find some days like the work I do, it's like intellectually quite challenging, and some days it's a lot easier to be fully engaged. Other days it's harder to get to that same level. So I was thinking like maybe I should just step it down and go like 80% as opposed to 100% sometimes. But yeah, I'm still kind of trying to figure out what the best solution is with that and why that's happening. And part of that too is I find that if I'm low on sleep, if I've had like less than 6 hours sleep or whatever, again, energy is hard. It's hard to get as engaged, and I have like a bit of kind of like impatience. You know, I'm not as soft. I'm a bit there's probably a subtle frustration there that I have when I'm low on sleep. So yeah, just wondering. I want to explore that and try to see how I can achieve some consistency further and where that's coming from. Just wondering what you think.
Well, I think that you've answered it really well. I like it when you ask questions because you answer it. And it is actually in those decisions that we were talking about earlier. So if one recognizes the solution, which is more sleep, then applying that and then seeing if it will then yield the result, which it sounds like it will. Now, if it yields a result, but still you're a little bit cranky, then that's maybe a different conversation that one has with themselves. So where is that shortness of patience coming from? And so the first step is to then apply that logic, and then let's see what happens. And if it's still there, then it takes more inquiry. And to then just keep you moving forward until we talk again. If the inquiry, or if the logic then yields restfulness, but the impatience is there, then is it possible for you to catch yourself a fraction of a second before you were to engage with the impatience or act the impatience? That fraction of a second is all you need to then decide whether you're going to observe it or become it. And it's just a half second. And if you can incorporate that starting now, you're just taking a half second pause to observe everything. Then this will safeguard your ability to retain equanimity. Equanimity meaning consistency. That's what I suggest.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that. I think the second part, what you said, would definitely be something to try. That sounds interesting. Because the thing is, too, sometimes I don't have control of my sleep schedule. Sometimes I have to work on less sleep. So yeah, sometimes just being able to still be aware of that and perform.
So then meditation is best. Have a regular meditation practice because this is rest. And then develop this concept of dynamic relaxation. So what would it feel like to be lying on your bed, flat and just restful? Can you return that back into your body now? To any extent that you can, and then live from that place. Softening and relaxing and being restful. And just becoming okay with the fact that at this phase of life, sleep is not really readily available. So then the direction is for one to just simply accept and then begin to respond accordingly. It's a maturing, really. Growing up. Knowing that you are actually the one who is making the decision. Which is nice.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you going, Bhagwan?
How are you, good sir?
Good. I see you're walking really wonderful.
I am, thank you, yes.
Huh.
It was the cane that you made.
Yeah, it supports you a little bit, but I'm waiting for Lambert to call back with the new crystal. Something I just started doing was, I find that there's two types of meditation. There's the formal meditation and the informal. And what I mean by that is the formal is where you bookmark, as you suggest, morning, evenings, and you have a special place where you sit, a corner, a chair, or wherever, and you spend your moments doing your breathing and comfort and so on and so forth. But I also discovered that you can, I'm just saying this as an observation, and I think you would agree with me, you could be in a line at Safeway getting groceries, and you can go into a meditation state.
Most definitely.
And then those little drops seem to support you during the whole day, like 1 minute, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm surprised, but they seem to go into that bucket. And the one drop goes into the bucket and the next, and the bucket starts getting full. And then I'm just sharing this because I find that it supports me with my consistency that you're speaking of. Because I see that as the crutch. You can become consistent, you got it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And so I thought I'd share this, that if you're out and about and you have a moment where there's a line or there's a wait at the traffic jam or something to this effect, you can find your meditative state and be with that.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly that. And it returns back to the memory side. Just simple recall. It's amazing. We are amazingly designed.
And it does keep wearing that groove.
It does.
That new groove.
Mhm.
And that's what we're trying to do, correct?
That
is
is.
to shift from old patterns to new patterns.
That's right.
New neurons firing.
That's right. And realize that we are patterned. It's not like we're getting rid of patterns not to have any patterns. It's actually trading one pattern for the other.
Right.
And that pattern is really important because the pattern is the consistency.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's remembering again and again, and it's a very old, again, function. We remember where water is, we remember where we live, we remember where our food is. So in that same way, we remember more subtle things also. Like a state found within meditation that we can recall and then breathe into it. So try that as much as you can, even now. Remembering a meditative state, recalling it, and then breathing. And then notice, oh, it's there. But then let it fade, because you're going to move on to do other things, but it stimulated the nervous system and your endocrine system in a very specific way. And if you just return back to that every time you remember, you do not get obsessed over it, just whenever you remember. And then it just over time becomes stronger, stronger, and stronger. Chances are very high that there's a consistent experience that you feel within your meditation. There's the variable, and we want to get through all of that variable down to the depth of consistency. And if you're sitting, you want to ideally sit through all of the variable every time. Ideally not stopping until you've made it through it all, because that's just the emptying out of the mind, the content, the information of the day, all leaving. And then you can rest into that consistency. Notice it the next time, even tonight when we sit. Notice if there's something that you remember from yesterday's meditation as a sensation. And if yes, yes. Very good. And it will build, and then what will happen to your mind? So many good things. How will that influence your personality? How will that influence your relationships, your professional life, your ability to achieve the goals that you see that are important? Do the obstacles actually just melt away? What you thought was challenging is like not even hard anymore. It's a magical thing that we have. Being alive, amazing. We don't even know what it means yet. I'm so happy about that. Any other questions? How are you, sir? Very nice to see you. Salam.
From the cultural background that I'm coming from, and I'm sure that you agree with that, as a well-being human being, the body and mind are just part of us as a holistic well-being. How would you incorporate or correlate the other powerful element within us, and how we can bring it about to the meditation? For example, the heart matters, which could be either helping us or could become so distractive. Or the other powerful one, like our emotional intelligence. To me nowadays, for all of the contaminations that are happening around us, which kind of relates to the food anyway, the gut and the gut feelings, or the things that culturally similarly hold among most culture, we say, listen to your gut. How could we actually then bring these other powerful elements into this meditation so we can have some sort of a holistic approach to the meditations?
That's a very good question. And the answer is embodiment. So through meditation, we are embodying all experiences that we have. So we have that of the physical, we have that of the energetic that's connected to the breath, and then we have that of the mind. And the mind is holding thought, the mind is holding emotion, the mind is holding personality. But within that emotion, one part of the emotion is connected to thought, and the other part of the emotion is connected to feeling. And feeling is that heart matter that you're talking about, that's connected to the rhythms of the body, something that you feel very deeply. And that's further connected to that gut response that we get, follow your gut. So it's actually all one and the same. It's just now incorporating them all together as one and allowing them to live under the same roof, so to speak, under the same intelligence, with the body and the individual who is living within the body in mind as being the most important. So the how is softening, like what we were talking about today, into the way that these parts, so the emotion, the heart matters, the gut, wishes to communicate without superimposing a way it should or should not be. And in that, there is a heightened level of emotional intelligence, because within that, we are allowing ourselves to express the way that we need to express. What that means is if there's challenges within the emotion, if the emotion feels unheard or unsafe, it will express itself one way. And we must accept that, even if it is just in the quietude of our own sanctum, our house, or on that meditation cushion. And then within that, see if we can get to a place where it can become soft and easy, to the place where it can be a two-way street of communication. The emotion is something that's very pure. Emotion is beautiful. As emotion passes through, it shows you anger. It shows you happiness. It shows you beauty. It shows you so many things. But when it attempts to pass through and it gets caught up in the memory, then that's when it starts to pull in different directions and start to stimulate a remembering that begins to create another form of embodiment. That is the challenge. So it's actually the technique of meditation to enable these parts that you are talking about, these higher intelligences that exist, the higher intelligence that exists, to incorporate into the organic matter, which we call the body, so that then all can work as one. Yes, thank you. Very good. Any last questions? Okay, let's sit. Finding a position that is comfortable for you to sit. Keeping the eyes closed gently. Or if they feel the need to be open, see if you can just make it a half lid. So it's just barely open. And enable through your comfortable body position, enabling your body just to simply soften into relaxation. Allow the tissue level of your physical body to stimulate that relaxation through a simple letting go, through the shoulders, through the spinal muscles, within your pelvis and hips. And notice how the decision made to sit up straight has engaged your skeleton, the bones of the body, and the tissue can rest directly onto the bone. Opening the door to clearer communication. Notice the consistency of your breathing. The breath moves in and the breath moves out. Notice the natural qualities of goodness which exists within your breathing. See with your inner eye how the mind responds to this rhythm of breath. To the settled tissue. The strength of your skeleton. Focused on the rhythm of the breathing, the sensation which it produces, and the space within the mind. We are equipped and able to watch as the seer, as the observer, all activity which manifests from this inside place. From the safety of our observatory, that lookout point, the moment you realize that you can see with this inner eye, return back again and again to the spaciousness and the positive sensations which the breath, the organization, and the state of mind work together to produce. Keeping the eyes closed, let's bring full, deep breaths into the body. Keeping the eyes closed, bring your gaze into the space just there in front of you. And with a soft intensity, we want to maintain the integrity of the space, uninterrupted by thought. Starting now. Keeping the eyes closed, soften the gaze. Very slowly, gently, allow the eyes to open. Let's incorporate that which stood out from the talk, from the technique, even from your meditation tonight, and then apply it and see what happens. See if that consistency starts to increase and the ability to embody your meditative practice becomes more of a reality, which then will set you on the course to achieving that which you see with your mind's eye as being so incredibly important for you and your development. Thank you very much, everyone. Namaste. Enjoy your evening. Very nice to have you.